The night it all went down wasn't just another blackout, it was the kind that made people feel like the world had hit the off switch. Streetlights flickered, sirens wailed, and somewhere in downtown Kansas City, a group of strangers found themselves thrown together by fate, fear, and a whole lot of bad timing. It started at a 24-hour diner off Highway 71, the kind of place that smelled like burnt coffee and motor oil. Jackson Jax Reed, a retired Marine with a buzz cut and a past he didn't like talking about, sat in a corner booth nursing his black coffee when the waitress, a fiery redhead named Casey Miller, turned up the volume on the TV. The broadcast was chaos, anchors shouting about riots, emergency alerts cutting through, and blurry footage of people attacking each other in the streets. "Man, what the hell is this?" muttered Derek Lawson, a truck driver built like a tank, wiping his greasy hands on a napkin. Before anyone could answer, the power cut out completely. The diner went silent except for the rain hammering the windows. A second later, they heard the first scream, from outside. Jax's instincts kicked in. "Everyone get back," he ordered, standing up and scanning the windows. The screaming turned into a gurgle, then the sound of someone, banging against the glass. Casey gasped when she saw the silhouette of a man slamming his forehead into the diner window until the glass cracked. His eyes glowed faintly in the dark, his mouth smeared with something dark and dripping. "Holy hell," whispered Derek. "That guy's gone nuts." But it wasn't just him. 3 more shapes stumbled out of the rain, dragging their feet like broken marionettes. One of them, a woman in a nurse's outfit, had half her face missing. Casey dropped her tray. "Those ain't people anymore," Jax said grimly, pulling the hunting knife he always kept strapped to his boot. Before anyone could process what was happening, the glass shattered. Chaos erupted, chairs flying, people screaming. Jax moved fast, shoving Casey and Derek toward the kitchen. One of the infected lunged at a teenage busboy named Kevin, who froze like a deer in headlights. Jax tackled the creature, slamming his knife into its temple. It went limp instantly, but more were coming. "Out the back. Now!" Jax barked. They bolted through the kitchen door, slipping on spilled grease, the emergency exit swinging open into the storm. Casey stumbled but Derek grabbed her arm, hauling her upright. Outside, the parking lot was a horror movie, cars overturned, alarms blaring, people running from figures that didn't even flinch when hit. A police cruiser screeched around the corner, sirens wailing, but the driver barely had time to react before 2 of the creatures jumped on the hood, pounding and biting through the windshield. The cruiser swerved and slammed into a light pole, bursting into flames. "Get to my rig!" Derek shouted, pointing toward his semi parked by the edge of the lot. They sprinted, Jax covering their backs, knifing down another zombie that lunged too close. Kevin fumbled with the handle before finally yanking the door open, and everyone piled in. Derek hit the ignition, the engine roaring to life just as a swarm of infected spilled out from the diner. He floored it, tires squealing as they tore down the slick highway, leaving behind the hell that had once been their city. Inside the cab, the air was thick with fear. Casey's hands shook as she pressed a towel to Kevin's bleeding arm. He'd been scratched. "We need to find help," she said, voice trembling. "Cops, military, something." Jack shook his head. "There's no help coming. Not tonight." He'd seen enough in those few minutes to know this wasn't some riot. This was the end of something big. The radio crackled, and a trembling voice came through. "This is an emergency broadcast. Stay indoors. Avoid contact with the infected. Do not." The transmission cut to static. Derek's eyes darted to Jax. "You think it's everywhere?" Jax didn't answer. Instead, he stared out at the dark horizon, where the city's lights had vanished completely. Only distant fires burned now. "Yeah," he said quietly. "It's everywhere." They drove for miles, until they spotted an old rest stop off the highway. It looked abandoned, but they needed shelter. They parked the truck behind the building and killed the headlights. Inside, the place smelled of mildew and dust. A vending machine flickered faintly, its light casting eerie shadows across the tiled floor. "We'll rest here till dawn," Jack said. Casey nodded, but her eyes stayed on Kevin, who'd gone pale and quiet in the corner. His breathing was shallow. "Hey, kid, you all right?" Derek asked. Kevin looked up, sweat beading his forehead. I don't feel so good," he murmured. Jax's stomach dropped. He'd seen that look before, too many times in too many war zones. The silence in the room grew heavy as they all realized the same thing: their first night together might also be their last. Outside, in the distance, the low moans of the undead rolled through the storm, carried on the wind like a warning. The final night had begun, and hope was already fading. By the time the first light of dawn crept through the cracked windows of the rest stop, the rain had stopped, but the world hadn't gotten any quieter. The highway was a ghost strip now, littered with abandoned cars and torn-up signs. Smoke rose from the city in the distance, painting the sky a dirty orange. Inside, the group sat in tense silence, the only sound the soft hum of Derek's rig outside and Kevin's ragged breathing. His fever had spiked during the night. Casey had tried cooling him down with bottled water and paper towels, but deep down everyone knew what was coming. "Kid's burning up," Derek muttered, pacing near the door. "We can't just sit here, man. We gotta find help." "Help's gone," Jax replied, his tone flat as he checked his knife and reloaded his old Glock. "The best we can do now is stay alive and keep moving." Casey glared at him. "You can't just give up on him like that. He's just a kid." "I'm not giving up," Jack said quietly. "I'm being real. If he turns, you won't have time to think about it, you'll need to act." Kevin groaned, rolling over, his skin turning pale gray around the edges. Casey bit her lip, fighting back tears. She'd only known the boy a few hours, but it didn't matter, he'd become one of them. That's what survival did to people, it made strangers into family faster than anything else. Jack stood by the window, scanning the tree line. He spotted movement, slow shapes weaving between the cars, heading their way. "We got company," he said. "Pack up. We leave now." Derek peeked outside. "There's at least 20 of them, man. We can't outrun that many on foot." "Then we drive through," Jax answered. They moved fast. Casey helped Derek carry Kevin, who was barely conscious now, to the truck. Jax covered them, firing 2 quick shots into the first zombie that got too close. The gunfire echoed like thunder, drawing more of them from the woods. Groaning, dragging feet, dead eyes, each one worse than the last. By the time Derek hit the gas, the horde had surrounded the lot. The semi roared forward, smashing through the first wave of bodies like bowling pins. Blood splattered the windshield, and Casey screamed, clutching Kevin tighter. "Don't stop!" Jax shouted. Derek didn't. He drove until they broke free of the pack, swerving around wrecked cars and debris. The road stretched ahead, empty but far from safe. They'd made it out, but the silence that followed was even worse. They drove for hours through small towns that looked frozen in time, stores looted, bodies lying in the streets, every radio signal dead. Somewhere past a wrecked gas station, Derek spotted a sign for Fort Stillwater, National Guard facility, 15 miles. "That's it," he said. "That's where we're going." Jax frowned. "You sure it's not overrun like everything else?" "Don't care," Derek shot back. "It's the only place we got left." Half an hour later, the truck pulled up near the outskirts of a rural area. The fort was on a hill, surrounded by chain-link fencing topped with barbed wire. It looked half-abandoned, no guards, no vehicles moving. But there was smoke coming from one of the barracks, which meant someone, or something, was still inside. Jax motioned for silence. They approached on foot, weapons ready. The gates hung open, one side bent inward like something massive had rammed it. The inside looked like a war zone, bullet holes, blood trails, smashed radios. They crept toward the main building, stepping over shell casings and discarded gear. Casey stayed close behind Jax, whispering, "Maybe the soldiers made it out?" Jack shook his head. If they did, they didn't leave in one piece. Inside the barracks, the air was thick with decay. Cots were overturned, supplies scattered everywhere. Then, from the shadows, came a faint voice. "Help, please." Casey froze. "Someone's alive." She rushed ahead before Jax could stop her. Lying under a table was a young woman in a torn uniform, clutching her leg, bitten, but not turned. "I'm Lieutenant Morgan Hayes," she gasped. "The outbreak started here. We tried to contain it, but it's airborne now." Jax's jaw tightened. "Airborne? You mean?" "Yes," Morgan whispered. "The virus mutated. It's not just bites anymore." Before anyone could respond, a loud crash came from the hallway. Derek swung around, shotgun raised. A wave of undead soldiers poured through the doorway, their uniforms still bearing the American flag. "Move!" Jax shouted. They fired back, the sound deafening in the narrow hall. Bullets tore through rotting flesh, but there were too many. Jax grabbed Casey and Morgan, shoving them toward the back exit while Derek laid down cover fire. They burst out into the daylight, sprinting toward the truck. Morgan limped badly, blood soaking her pant leg. Derek fired one last blast before diving into the cab, slamming the door. As they sped off, the fort disappeared behind them in a haze of smoke and gunfire. Inside, everyone was silent. Kevin was gone, his body had stopped breathing during the fight. Casey turned away, sobbing quietly. Jax looked at Morgan in the passenger seat, her eyes glassy from pain. "You better start talking," he said. "What do you mean, airborne?" Morgan swallowed hard. "If you're breathing this air, it might already be too late." Outside, the morning sun broke through the clouds, but it didn't bring hope. It brought clarity. The fight wasn't just for survival anymore. It was for whatever was left of humanity. The road stretched on forever, gray, cracked asphalt cutting through a world that didn't make sense anymore. Every mile they drove, the air got thicker, heavier. The horizon shimmered with heat and smoke, and the smell of rot seemed to follow them like a curse. Inside Derek's rig, silence had turned into something alive, something that sat between them, breathing down their necks. Kevin's body had been wrapped in an old blanket and left behind near Fort Stillwater. Nobody said a word about it, but every one of them felt the hole he left behind. Morgan Hayes sat in the passenger seat, pale and sweating. Her military jacket was torn, and she kept pressing her hand to the wound on her thigh. Jax had patched it up the best he could with duct tape and a med kit they'd looted from the base, but infection was a matter of time. Still, her mind was sharp, eyes darting across the empty fields as if searching for something. "There's a safe zone," she said suddenly, breaking the silence. "A research outpost near Lincoln, Nebraska. They were working on an antidote before everything went to hell. If anyone's still alive, that's where they'll be." Derek gave her a skeptical look. "You sure that's not just another ghost story? Last time we followed military promises, we almost got turned into dinner." Morgan looked straight ahead. "I saw the files myself. It's real. And it's our only shot." Jax leaned forward from the back seat. "Then that's where we're headed. But we do it smart. We stop only when we have to, we stay off main roads, and we don't trust anyone we meet." Casey nodded weakly, her face drawn from exhaustion. She'd barely slept, her eyes red from crying. "Yeah," she whispered. "No more surprises." They followed the highway north, passing through small towns that looked like ghost towns from some apocalyptic movie. Gas stations burned, stores were looted, and the roads were scattered with wrecks and bones. Every now and then, They'd see a figure in the distance, sometimes walking, sometimes just standing still, like the world had paused mid-chaos. And sometimes, those figures started running. By afternoon, the gas gauge was nearly on empty. Derek cursed under his breath. "We need to refuel. There's a truck stop up ahead. If the tanks ain't bone dry, we can fill up and keep moving." Jax nodded but kept his gun ready. "We goin' fast, quiet, and only take what we need." The truck stop looked deserted. The sign above it flickered, reading Speedy's Fuel and Eats, half the letters burned out. They parked behind the building, weapons drawn, and split up, Derek and Jax toward the pumps, Casey and Morgan to scavenge inside. The wind howled across the empty lot, carrying the faint hum of something unnatural. Inside, the convenience store was wrecked, shelves overturned, blood smeared across the walls, candy scattered on the floor like someone had dropped it mid-robbery. Casey kept her flashlight low as she checked the aisles. "This place gives me the creeps," she muttered. Morgan limped behind her, keeping her pistol aimed. "You think the people who did this got out?" Casey asked. Morgan's reply came out cold: "Nobody got out." Back outside, Derek found one pump that still worked, siphoning gas into the truck. Jax scanned the tree-line. "We got 5 minutes, tops," he said. "Let's move." But before he could finish, a sharp sound cut through the air, a gunshot. Jax spun around, heart pounding. "Casey!" They sprinted toward the store, bursting through the doors to find chaos. Morgan was on the ground, struggling with a man in torn camouflage. His face was sunken, but he was no zombie, he was human. Wild, desperate, and starving. "Get away from her!" Casey shouted, swinging a crowbar at the man's arm. He stumbled back, bleeding. "You don't get it," he hissed, voice cracked. "They're coming. The air, it's bringing them. You breathe too long, you become one." Before anyone could react, he bolted out the back door into the field. Jax chased after him, but it was too late. The man didn't make it 10 steps before collapsing, convulsing violently. His skin turned gray, veins bulging like cords under his flesh. Within seconds, he was one of them. "Get to the truck!" Jax yelled. They ran, Morgan hobbling, Casey covering her. Derek floored at the moment everyone was inside. In the rearview mirror, Jax watched as dozens of infected poured out from the fields, drawn by the noise. The man had been right, something in the air was changing them faster now. They drove until the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in blood-red streaks. Casey sat in silence, her hands trembling as she stared at Morgan. "If this thing's airborne," she whispered, "then we're all infected." Morgan didn't deny it. "Maybe," she said. "But the outpost, they were close to a cure. If we can get there, maybe we still have a chance." Jax stared out the window, the endless road ahead bathed in fading light. "Then we drive till the wheels fall off," he said. Behind them, the world burned quietly. Ahead, the unknown waited, alive, hungry, and spreading faster than anyone could run. The highway had no end, and hope was getting harder to believe in. But for now, they kept driving, because stopping meant dying. By the time the sun dipped below the horizon again, the sky looked bruised, dark purple clouds rolling in like a warning. The rig's headlights cut through the dusk as Derek guided it down a dirt road that wound between open cornfields and rusted fences. They'd been driving for nearly 16 hours straight, and everyone looked half dead from exhaustion. Casey dozed in the back seat, her head resting against the window, while Morgan clutched a folded map in her lap, whispering directions to Derek. Jack sat shotgun, eyes scanning the road for movement. Every shadow looked wrong. Every sound made his hand drift toward his gun. "We're close," Morgan said weakly. "About 2 miles. You'll see a radio tower in a warehouse. That's the outpost." Jax didn't answer right away. "You're sure it's still standing?" Morgan nodded slowly. "If we're lucky, yeah. They were running tests on an airborne counteragent. If the scientists made it, maybe they found a way to slow this thing down." "Lucky," Derek snorted. That word's been dead a long time. When they finally saw the tower, it rose from the mist like a skeleton, bent, rusted, half-collapsed. At its base sat a low concrete building surrounded by barbed wire and sandbags. The place looked fortified, but empty. No lights. No guards. Just silence. Derek parked the truck behind a wrecked Humvee, cutting the engine. "All right," Jack said, stepping out first. "Stay sharp. We don't know what's inside." The front gate hung open, swaying in the wind. They moved in slowly, flashlights slicing through the dark. The courtyard was littered with bullet casings and medical gear, gas masks, broken syringes, blood-stained clipboards. Casey picked one up and frowned. "This says subject 4, conversion time, 3 minutes. What does that mean?" Morgan didn't answer. Her face had gone pale. Inside, the outpost was worse, walls covered in scrawled warnings: "Trust in 01, the air is lying, the cure kills." Lab tables were overturned, and a generator hummed faintly in the corner, running on fumes. Jax checked each room, finding signs of a fight: bullet holes, smashed monitors, even claw marks on the doors. "Whatever went down here," he said, "they didn't win." Then, from deeper in the hall, came a voice. "Don't shoot. Please." The group spun around, weapons raised. A man stepped out, hands raised, a scientist, mid-30s, with wild eyes and a blood-streaked lab coat. "I'm Dr. Nolan," he said, shaking. You made it here." "Thank God." Morgan stepped forward. "Dr. Nolan. You were in charge of the counteragent, right?" He nodded quickly. "Yes, but it's not what you think. The cure, it wasn't ready. It didn't stop the virus. It changed it." Casey frowned. "Changed it how?" Dr. Nolan swallowed hard. "We tried to make it fight the infection, but instead it bonded with it. The subjects didn't die, they evolved. Faster, stronger, smarter. They can mimic sounds now. Even voices." A cold silence fell over the group. Derek rubbed his temples. "You mean those things out there can talk?" "Not talk," Nolan said, voice trembling. "Imitate. They use it to lure survivors. The last team that went outside never came back." As if on cue, a faint sound echoed from the hall. "Help, please." Casey froze. "That sounded like Kevin," she whispered, her voice breaking. Jax's blood ran cold. Kevin was gone, long gone. But the voice came again, clearer this time. "Casey, help me." Jax raised his gun. "That ain't him. Everyone get behind me." The group backed into the lab as the sound grew closer. Slow footsteps, then another voice, this time, Jax's own voice, repeating his earlier words: "Stay sharp. We don't know what's inside." Casey gasped. "It's copying you." Then, the glass window shattered. A creature slammed through, skin stretched tight, eyes milky white, veins pulsing black. It didn't move like the others, it was faster, almost human. Jax opened fire, 3 clean shots to the chest, but it kept coming. Derek swung a fire extinguisher, knocking it back long enough for Jax to grab Morgan and shove her toward the stairs. "Upstairs," he yelled. They bolted for the upper level, Nolan panting behind them. The creature scrambled after, shrieking in a voice that kept glitching between human words and animal growls. Jax fired again, hitting it in the throat. This time, it dropped, but even as it twitched, it was still smiling. They barricaded the door upstairs with metal cabinets. Everyone was breathing hard. Morgan slumped against the wall, clutching her leg. That was subject 4, she whispered. "The first one we tested the airborne agent on." Derek looked at Jax. "So, what now, boss?" Jax checked his ammo. "Now? We find out what these people were really doing here, and we torch this place before more of those things get loose." Down below, faint scratching began against the door, followed by whispers and familiar voices. "Let me in, it's safe now, please." Casey covered her ears. "Make it stop," she said, shaking. Jack stared at the door, his grip tightening on his gun. "No," he muttered. "It's just getting started." Outside, the wind carried a new sound, the hum of engines. Someone, or something, was coming. And this time, it wasn't just the dead. The pounding started just before dawn, heavy, deliberate thuds against the reinforced door below them. Each hit made the walls shudder, dust falling from the ceiling. Jack stood near the stairwell with his Glock raised, eyes sharp despite not having slept. Derek was checking his shotgun shells, muttering under his breath. Casey sat against the wall, arms wrapped around her knees, trying to block out the eerie voices still echoing outside. And Morgan, she was fading fast. Her wound had turned black around the edges, and her skin was slick with sweat. Dr. Nolan sat hunched over a workbench, surrounded by vials, notebooks, and half-broken lab equipment. His hands shook as he mixed chemicals into a syringe. "If I can get the dosage right," he said, "this might neutralize the infection temporarily." Jax raised an eyebrow. "Temporarily?" Nolan gave a humorless laugh. "You think I've got a miracle cure in a bottle?" "No. I've got a maybe. And maybe's better than nothing." The pounding below grew louder, closer. Casey flinched. "They're not breaking through, are they?" Jax's jaw clenched. "They will." Suddenly, the sound stopped. Silence. The kind that made the air feel electric. Derek cocked his shotgun. "They're regrouping," he muttered. "Like they're thinking." Jax glanced at Nolan. "You said they were evolving. How smart are we talking?" Nolan hesitated. "Smart enough to hunt in packs. Smart enough to wait." Before Jax could respond, the window shattered behind them. A long, clawed hand shot through, grabbing Nolan by the collar. He screamed as Jax fired twice, shattering the glass and sending the creature falling backward. Nolan stumbled, clutching his chest, eyes wide. "They're inside the perimeter," he gasped. Derek ran to the window, scanning the courtyard below. What he saw made his stomach drop. Dozens, maybe hundreds, of the infected were pouring through the open gate, some crawling on all fours, others sprinting with unnatural speed. At their center was something bigger, a hulking figure, at least 7 feet tall, its flesh stitched with metal and wire. It moved like a machine, dragging a massive chain behind it. "Oh, hell no," Derek whispered. Jax took charge immediately. "We move. Grab what you can and head for the service tunnel." "Nolan, you said there was an underground exit?" Nolan nodded, trembling. "Yes. Through the lower lab. It connects to a drainage field about a mile out." "Then that's our way out," Jax said. "Move it." They descended the stairs carefully, every creak sounding like an alarm. The hall below was dark except for flickering emergency lights. The walls were smeared with fresh blood, some of it still dripping. When they reached the lab door, Jax signaled for silence. Then, slowly, he pushed it open. The lower lab was chaos, overturned gurneys, shattered glass, and in the middle, 3 corpses strapped to tables, their chests cut open. "They were experimenting on them," Casey whispered, horror in her voice. Nolan avoided her eyes. "We had to understand the mutation," he said quietly. "We didn't have a choice." Jax stared him down. "You always have a choice." Before the argument could go further, the ceiling above them shook violently. The floor cracked, dust raining down. Derek looked up, eyes wide. "They're coming through." A deafening roar split the air. The wall burst inward, and the massive creature from outside barreled through, dragging its chain. It moved fast, faster than anything that size should. Jax fired a full clip into its chest, nothing. Derek threw a flashbang, the explosion lighting up the lab like lightning. The creature reeled for a second, roaring in rage. "Now!" Jax yelled. They bolted for the tunnel entrance, a narrow steel hatch near the far wall. Casey climbed in first, followed by Morgan and Nolan. Jax turned back just as the creature charged again. He ducked, diving through the hatch as Derek slammed it shut behind them. The thing hit the door like a wrecking ball, metal bending inward but somehow holding. The tunnel was pitch dark and smelled like rust and mold. Their footsteps echoed as they ran, the only light coming from Jax's flickering flashlight. Behind them, they could still hear the creature's howls, muffled but furious. "We ain't getting far if this place caves in," Derek grunted. "We'll make it," Jax said. "Just keep moving." After what felt like forever, they reached a rusted ladder leading up to a metal grate. Jax climbed first, pushing the grate open. Fresh air hit his face, a grim, smoky dawn. They crawled out into a field overgrown with weeds, the outpost burning behind them in the distance. Casey collapsed to her knees, shaking. "We can't keep running like this," she said. "There's nowhere left to go." Morgan, pale and weak, looked up at her. "There's one place left. The Central Command bunker in Omaha. That's where the original research files are. If the cure exists, it's there." Jax turned to the others. "Then that's where we go." Derek sighed, loading another shell into his shotgun. "Man, I don't know what's worse, being eaten alive or dying chasing ghosts." Jax smirked faintly. "Long as we're breathing, we fight." Behind them, the outpost erupted in flames, the tower collapsing into itself. The wind carried the faint echo of voices, mocking, familiar, human. The dead weren't just rising anymore. They were learning. And somewhere out there, something even worse was waiting for them. The drive to Omaha felt like moving through a ghost's dream, quiet highways lined with rusted cars, cracked billboards flapping in the wind, and towns that looked frozen mid-scream. The smell of smoke and decay clung to the air like it had become part of the atmosphere. Derek's rig roared down what was left of I-80, tires crunching over debris and bones. Inside the cab, everyone looked worn thin, like they'd already seen the end of the world and were just driving through the ashes. Morgan was barely conscious now, slumped in the passenger seat. The infection had spread fast, veins black and pulsing under her skin. Jax sat beside her, glancing between her and the map she'd marked with a shaky hand. "The command bunkers under the old military academy," she said weakly. "There's a tunnel entrance behind the west gate, but if Omaha's gone, you'll have to go in quiet." Casey turned from the back seat. "You're not making it sound too promising." Morgan managed a faint smirk. "Nothing's promising anymore." By the time the city's skyline appeared on the horizon, the sun was setting again, painting the world in fire. But Omaha wasn't a city anymore, it was a war zone. Smoke rose from every block, fires burned uncontrolled, and the streets were crawling with the infected. Jax's stomach dropped. "Jesus, it's worse than Kansas City." Derek slowed the rig, jaw tight. "We ain't driving through that mess. We'd be chum in 5 seconds flat." "There's a bypass road," Morgan whispered. "Goes around the east side. Get us near the academy without going through the downtown grid." They took the side route, winding past wrecked suburbs and burned-out police cruisers. Every so often, they'd hear the distant crack of gunfire, or worse, laughter that didn't sound human anymore. Casey gripped the crowbar in her lap like it was her last lifeline. "You think anyone's still alive in there?" she asked quietly. Jax stared out the window, voice low. "If they are, they ain't the same." When they reached the academy's outer fence, the place looked like it had been hit by a war. Guard towers toppled, sandbags torn open, dried blood splattered across the gate. Derek parked behind a half-buried Humvee, engine off. "All right," Jax said, "we going on foot. Quiet and fast. Casey, you stay with Morgan. Derek and I'll scout the entrance." They crept through the yard, weapons drawn. The silence was thick, broken only by the crunch of gravel under their boots. Then, from somewhere in the distance, came the echo of children's laughter. Derek froze. "You hear that?" "Yeah," Jax whispered. "That's not kids." The sound got closer, distorted, layered with static. Then they saw them. 3 figures walking down the courtyard, At first glance, they looked human. But as they drew closer, the truth hit like a punch. Their faces were half gone, their eyes glowing faint blue, and their mouths moved out of sync with the laughter still echoing. They were mimicking the living, another step in the mutation. Jax motioned for Derek to hold. But the creatures suddenly jerked toward them, heads twisting at impossible angles. "Run!" Jax hissed. They bolted toward the west gate, diving behind an overturned truck as gunfire erupted. From the shadows of the courtyard, real soldiers stepped out, alive, armed, and terrified. "Hold your fire!" Jax shouted, waving his hands. "We're human." The lead soldier, a tall man with dark hair and a blood-streaked uniform, aimed his rifle for a moment, then lowered it. "You picked a bad night to be alive," he said grimly. "Name's Captain Briggs." "You came for the bunker?" "Yeah," Jax replied. "Heard you've got the cure." Briggs laughed bitterly. "Cure? Buddy, that's the biggest joke left on this planet. The scientists down there? They tried to fix it. Ended up turning half my squad into those freaks." Before Jax could respond, a deafening roar tore through the courtyard, the ground shaking under their feet. The mutants from the lab had followed them. The massive one from Stillwater burst through the side wall, its body crawling with smaller, twitching infected. "Positions!" Briggs yelled, opening fire. Bullets lit up the night as the creatures charged. Derek fired his shotgun until it clicked empty, then swung it like a club. Jax moved like a machine, 2 headshots, reload, 1 more to the chest. But for every monster that fell, 2 more took its place. Briggs grabbed Jax by the collar. "We can't hold this line. The bunker's sealed, but there's another tunnel, north side, under the chapel." "Go!" Jax shouted. Derek dragged Casey and Morgan from the truck, and they sprinted across the courtyard as fire and screams filled the air. Briggs and his remaining men stayed behind, covering them with gunfire until the swarm consumed them. They reached the chapel just as the tower collapsed behind them, flames licking the sky. The entrance to the tunnel was hidden under a broken statue. Jax yanked it open and pushed the others inside. As they slid down into the dark, Casey turned back one last time and saw the city, Omaha, burning, the dead marching through fire like demons from hell. The tunnel was damp, echoing with the distant rumble of collapsing buildings above. Derek finally broke the silence. "We're running out of miracles, man." Jax wiped sweat and ash from his face. "Then we stopped waiting for one." He turned to Morgan, who was barely breathing now. "You said there's a main lab under this bunker, right?" She nodded weakly. "If the data's still there, you'll know how it started." Jax's eyes hardened. "Good. Because I'm done running. Time to finish this." Behind them, somewhere far above, Omaha finally fell silent, swallowed by smoke, blood, and the sound of a dying world. The tunnel beneath the ruined city was cold, wet, and endless, its walls carved from concrete and silence. The only sounds were the soft drip of water and the echo of their footsteps. Derek led the way, flashlight trembling in his hand, while Casey helped Morgan limp along behind him. Jax stayed close to the rear, checking their 6 every few seconds, his Glock raised, finger tight on the trigger. The deeper they went, the thicker the air got, tasting metallic, like blood and burnt wires. They finally reached a massive steel door with faded military markings, U.S. Command Biodivision, access restricted. Jax pressed his ear to it, then nodded. "Clear." Derek forced it open with a crowbar, and the smell hit them immediately, death, rot, and chemicals. Inside, rows of lab stations stretched across the room, most smashed or covered in dried blood. Computer monitors flickered faintly, still running on backup power. Casey's flashlight caught something scrawled across the far wall in what looked like black paint, but it wasn't paint. It read, "The cure failed. We became God." Morgan stumbled forward, eyes glassy. "This is it," she whispered. "This is where it began." She moved to one of the terminals, her fingers trembling as she brought up the last log entries. Static and half-burned code filled the screens, but the message was clear enough: Project Elysium, status, terminated. Outcome, merged host successful. Jax frowned. Merged host? What does that mean? Morgan's voice cracked. It means they didn't just try to cure the infection. They tried to bond with it, to make humanity immune by integrating the virus itself. But instead of saving us, it evolved. Before anyone could respond, the floor vibrated, low and rhythmic, like something massive moving below. Derek's flashlight flickered. Tell me that's not what I think it is. Morgan's eyes widened. The primary host, it's still alive. A metallic shriek echoed from somewhere deep in the tunnels, and a gust of hot air swept through the lab. Then came the sound of footsteps, slow, dragging, but impossibly heavy. Jax motioned everyone behind a workstation. Stay low. Whatever it is, we don't fight it head-on. From the shadows emerged something that barely resembled a human. The merged host stood nearly 8 feet tall, its body a twisted blend of flesh and steel, glowing veins pulsing like molten lava under translucent skin. Its face was half human, half machine, eyes burning like embers. The thing turned its head slowly toward them, and then, in a voice that was both human and monstrous, it spoke. Why do you run from salvation? Casey gasped. It talks. Jax's grip tightened on his gun. That ain't talking. That's mocking us. The creature moved faster than expected, slamming its arm through a desk and sending metal flying. Jax fired 3 shots, all hitting center mass, but it barely flinched. Derek grabbed a fuel canister from the corner, yanking his lighter from his pocket. Hey, ugly, he yelled, tossing it across the floor. The explosion rocked the room, flames swallowing half the lab. The creature stumbled, roaring in rage, but it wasn't done. It tore through the fire, swinging a massive metal limb and hurling Derek into a wall. Derek! Casey screamed, running to him. He groaned but waved her off. Still kicking, just real sore. Jax pulled Morgan toward a nearby control console. How do we kill it? You can't, she rasped. But you can destroy the lab. There's a failsafe, a core reactor under the main platform. Overload it, and it'll wipe everything in a 10-mile radius. Jax nodded grimly. Then that's the plan. While Casey helped Derek to his feet, Jax climbed onto the control platform. The reactor pulsed like a beating heart beneath the floor. Sparks rained down as the system came online. The creature turned toward him, realizing what he was doing. You would destroy your last hope, it hissed. Jax looked it dead in the eye. You were never hope. He slammed the activation lever. Alarms wailed. The entire bunker began to shake, red lights flashing as warning sirens screamed, reactor overload INT-3 minutes. Move! Jax shouted. They ran for the tunnel as the creature howled behind them, its voice distorted through the intercoms. You can't stop what's already inside you. They burst through the emergency hatch and stumbled into the open field above. The night sky was dark and starless, the horizon glowing orange from the fires of the fallen city. Casey turned back toward the ruins. Jax, what about the others? What about? Keep running, he barked. They made it just past the tree line when the explosion hit. The ground shook violently, a mushroom of fire tearing through the bunker and swallowing the remains of Omaha in light. The shockwave knocked them to the ground, heat washing over them like a final sunrise. When the noise faded, the world was silent again. Just 3 figures lay among the ashes, Derek, Casey, and Jax. Morgan hadn't made it out, her body was gone, part of the fire. Derek rolled onto his back, coughing. You think that did it? Jax stared at the burning horizon. We stopped it here, he said quietly. But if it's airborne like she said, he trailed off. Casey looked up at the sky. Black clouds were rolling in, glowing faintly red around the edges. Then it's already out there, she whispered. Jax got to his feet, holstering his empty Glock. Then we keep going. Find whoever's left. Fight till there's nothing left to fight. Derek smirked tiredly. Always the Marine. Always, Jax replied. As the first drops of rain fell, thick and dark like ash, the three of them walked into the smoke-filled dawn. Behind them, humanity's last city burned. Ahead, the unknown waited. The final night wasn't the end. It was only the beginning of the last hope.